Welcome to the Money Over 50 podcast, brought to you by Dallas Davison and Michael Hogue from Money Over 50 Financial Advisors. This information is general in nature and does not take into account your objectives, financial situation, or needs. Therefore, you should consider whether the information is appropriate for you and your personal circumstances. If you require personal advice, please contact Money Over 50 Financial Advisors. Here are your hosts, Dallas Davison and Michael Hogue.
Welcome to Money Over 50 with Dallas and Michael. Possessions or experiences? Question mark.
Thanks, Michael. This sort of flowed a bit off another podcast. We've talked about, money as a medium for transferring work and enterprise into possessions and experiences. And so that breakdown into possessions and experiences. Mm. I actually really like that terminology, as that is all. Those are the only two things that you can spend money on. Mm. Those are the only two buckets of money that you can spend money on. It's like the old, there's two types of people in this world. Like that exactly.
Saying. There's two types of things in this world, possessions or experiences. Like that, that you can exchange the energy source that we know money to be.
Yep.
For
either
possessions or experiences.
Yeah. And I think, there's so possessions including, consumable possessions. Like if I buy food, that's I have to possess that in order to consume it. So possessions includes all of the things that you then are consuming immediately, or that you are, consuming over the next 30 years. So that's, I think, an interesting one to start grouping that possessions into. If I buy a bag of spinach, and if I buy a house, those are both possessions. And I've talked before about this many times when it comes to houses, is that a house is a consumption item. And it's a hill that I'm willing to die on, and I know this now because I own a house. It's a constant battle against entropy. So
it is.
In the same way that you need to buy that bag of spinach in order to eat that, to keep yourself healthy, you need to buy a house. Well, you need a house. You need shelter from the elements. Shelter. Otherwise you will die. So that's the point that I make there, and the reason that I want to clarify that is that this isn't a black and white right or wrong answer. So we've talked before many times about how we tend to think that we value experiences as a rule more than possessions, and most of our clients and most people that we talk to, what they really want is experiences, and if they're not careful, they get sidetracked on spending money on possessions instead. But it's important to note that possessions, you can't just spend money on experiences. That's not how it works. You have to. There are some things that you have to buy just in order to keep body and soul together. But the point of,
so you're asking the question as well. You ask the question, so that the listeners get a thought in your head. Which way do you lean, possessions or experiences?
Do you prefer possessions or experiences? And now,
so just a quick example on that. Do you prefer to buy tech equipment, for example, like the latest cameras and phones and all that, or do you prefer to travel? Yeah, like that's a good example there. So which side do you lean towards?
Do you prefer to have a new car every 3 years, or do you prefer to go out to dinner once a week? There's all sorts of examples we could use there of that trade-off of the money that you spend on possessions is money that you don't have for experiences, and vice versa. And that's a good, there's nothing wrong with either of those decisions. If you say, I love a new car, and so I buy a new car, I change my cars over every 3 years. Because of that, it probably costs me an extra, $200 a week. That's the money that, we as a couple don't go out to dinner. We stay home and cook at home instead, and we prefer that. And we don't really like the experience of going out for a nice dinner. So that's a perfectly valid choice. Saying we don't care about cars and we really like going out to nice restaurants and having a nice meal every week, and that's a really, a ritual. It's an important part of our life. That is also a perfectly valid choice. Now, why I phrase this as a question, though, is do you prefer possessions or experiences? Is that you tend, it's like a political spectrum. You can't be all one thing. People tend to lean one way or the other. And given that we've just said there is no right or wrong answer here, what I do think is interesting is now that you've stated your preference, so sit there for a minute and think about which of those do you think you prefer, and if you're a member of a couple, which one do you prefer and which one does your spouse prefer? Now that you've stated your preference, the experiment that I want you to actually do is look back at what you've actually spent money on in the last 5 years. And this can be a fairly sobering thing. And this is something that we have spent a lot of time talking about our clients with, is that more so when we used to do detailed budgets with people. People would come in and sit down and say, this is, and you get talking about it, and people would say, this is what's really important to me. For example, spending time, my extended family, it's really important to me to spend time with them. And some of them live in Brisbane, some of them live in Sydney. It's really important for me to spend time with them, and family is really the key to me. And then you'd do their budget and you'd go, okay, so there's a line item here for trips to Brisbane to see the family, and it's $3,000 for once a year to go and book a room for a week and pay for flights. And then there'd be other line items, which is car repayments, $17,000 a year. Mortgage repayments, $40,000 per year. Clothes, $6,000 a year. Shopping, all these different possessions that chewed up all the budget. And so that's a really tangible way to do it. And I think you can probably do it without making it tangible, but it is an interesting experience. If you look at your budget, not your budget, not what you think you will spend money on, but look at what you actually have spent money on.
Evidence-based.
This is what you have spent money on in the last 5 years.
Yep.
Does that line up with what you just decided is more important to your possessions or experiences? And again, the same thing applies here. If you're telling me that, having a really nicely, having a house with nice furniture and again, this is some people, that is genuinely what they get a lot of enjoyment out of, is to have the perfect, lounge suite and the perfect fridge and the perfect thing that's what they really enjoy doing. If those people are spending $30,000 a year on an overseas holiday and they can't afford to go and buy the fridge that they want or the whatever, they've got that all backwards. This isn't to say that you shouldn't, one way is right. It's just look back at what you actually spend money on. Does that line up with what you have just said in terms of what's important to you?
Yeah. Look, it's a very, very interesting thought concept.
Yeah.
Because I'm just running the numbers of myself, and I say I'm an experienced person.
Yep.
However, I'm in the process now of doing an expensive renovation to my house.
Yep.
Which will include furniture and things like that. So when I look at it, I am an experienced person at heart.
Yep.
My situation at the moment is that I can't travel for 3 months at a time like I did, like my wife and I did just after we were married. We travelled around France and America for 3 months. We can't do that with a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old now. So it's actually become more the other way.
Yes.
And a lot of what we're doing with the house, for example, is because we know that we'll be there for the next 20 years at least, because my daughter's only 4 and we hope to have her there till she's 24.
She probably wants to leave at 16, but that's right.
That's right. So it's a really interesting thought process, and I think you have to do it evidence based. You have to actually go back and say, okay, what did I actually do?
Well, and I think,
and there's an element you can never be, like you said, you can never be one way completely because of. I mean, there's certain things you wouldn't look at the weekly grocery bill from Woolworths and say, well, I bought possessions with that, because that's a necessity, I guess. I think
there's a component of this.
We're talking about discretional spending here. We're talking about discretional spending. We're talking about if you have.
Yeah, just to push back on that though, I think there is a component. It's like the analogy. I've got the philosophical concept of I told the story in another podcast about the coat, that you buy the coat and then you buy the. What I'd be mindful of is even those expenses that people go, well, we have to have this. What I've seen a lot is people go, they use the Woolworths bill as the example, but what they actually then say is, well, the Woolworths bill is $300 a week, and the rates bill is $6,000 a year because we live in this and area. And everything's actually a bit more expensive. So the Woolworths bill that's $400 a week probably could actually be $300. It's just that they spend money on things that
look, there's an element of all of that. Yeah, like so clothing is another good example. So you need clothes. Of course, everyone needs clothes, but like you can take it to extreme. There's an element of basic basic necessities, and then there's an element potentially of discretional spending.
That's right, and that's where I think it gets really interesting and messy is to realise that. So, I'm sitting here wearing an R.M. Williams polo shirt. This shirt costs $130. When I was 17, I used to buy a polo shirt from I don't even know where for $20.
Mm-hmm.
So I could easily sit here and convince myself or say I'm all about experiences. Oh yeah, this polo shirt. Oh well, I had to have a shirt, so that's why I bought the shirt. No, that's not necessarily the case. Now, there's all sorts of other arguments about this shirt's going to last longer and all the rest of it, but that's I think your point there, and that's a good point. Is that what you really want to think about is the discretionary portion of that. So if I'm spending $130 on a shirt instead of $30, there's $100 there that got applied to a possession that could have got applied to either a possession or an experience. And again, that's fine because I've obviously made a decision to apply it in that way. But that's where the evidence-based side of it becomes really interesting, because we see. I always joke about that. I got sick of doing budgets with people because I got sick of getting lied to. What people tell you that is important to them and what people tell you they are going to spend money on are vastly different to what people actually spend money on.
And look, it is. And I had the same experience when I went to a nutritionist one day, and he was very smart about what he was.
I was just about to tell this story because it's so good.
Because he didn't say, what are you going to eat? What do you like to eat? He said, tell me everything you ate in the last 24 hours. And I went, oh. Jeez, I don't usually have this, but I had ice cream for dessert, and then like we went through from breakfast to dinner.
Yep.
And what we worked out is the reason that I was carrying extra kilos is about 40% of my diet was discretional spending.
Yes.
It was. I didn't need that ice cream, and I didn't need that Chico roll, and I didn't need that.
That's completely fine. If you say, you know what, I really get a lot of enjoyment out of that, and I'm willing to carry another couple of kilos, and I'm okay with it, that's fine too. But what you can't do is go into that nutritionist and say, I want to be a peak athlete, and I want to be ripped, and I want to be, at my peak of my athletic ability. Okay, well, what did you eat in the last 24 hours? Well, the diet that I've eaten in the last 24 hours does not line up with what I'm telling you.
What I'm telling you, yeah, that's right.
So that's a great. I love that story because I think nutritionists have got it worked out, and that's actually was one of my motivations to move away from doing budgets with people and looking at the way that I do this now for people. Is like, okay, how much money did you earn over the last year?
Yep.
Essentially. Okay, I take home $90,000 a year. My wife takes home $110,000 a year. Okay, so there's $200,000 a year that's come in for the year. Any other lump sums? No other lump sums. Okay, great. So there's $200,000 came in. At the start of the year, you owed $200,000 on your home loan. At the end of the year, you had paid $70,000 off that home loan. Your home loan's now that. So you $200,000 came in, $70,000 went to the home loan, $130,000 disappeared somewhere. When you say that to people, they go, "Oh no, we don't spend $130,000 a year," but you did. Like, where is that money?
Where is the money?
Where is that? And again, it's really interesting because it becomes a thing of stated preferences, revealed preferences. People will tell you, "No, we don't want to spend $130,000 a year." So when we're looking at retirement, no, we'll spend $60,000 a year in retirement.
Yeah,
that's a stated preference. I much prefer, and I think it saves everyone time to just look back and go, what did you do over the last year? What actually happened here? What have you done? What did you spend money on? Don't tell me what you think you should spend money on in the future. Yeah. Show me what you did spend money on. And now once you do that, you then have a choice to make. Is you might decide, right, well, we did spend $130,000 a year. We don't want to do that. We do think that we could cut out a lot of spending and still live a really good lifestyle. What we're going to do is we're going to take $30,000 there. We're going to put that into superannuation. We are going to just force ourselves to live on that $100,000, and all of those possessions and experiences can fight it out. And whatever is most important, the cream will rise to the top, and $30,000 will go into super, so that then in 10 years' time we're in a position where we can continue to spend the $100,000 a year. So that's, I guess, part one of that is to looking at those preferences, is to how much was spent. Part two of that is to then, when you're having to make choices about, okay, well, we have to, whether it's cut back or whether it's just while we're thinking about how much money even if we decided we're going to keep spending 130,000, it's a really useful exercise to go through and go, where did that money go? What if I'm telling you that, you know, travel is really important to me and I want to see the world, and you know, COVID aside, because it's sort of been a bit different, but in a normal year, if you tell me that you spend 130,000 and that travel is really important to you, and the only trip you went on for the year was a trip to, you know, if you're in Townsville, a trip to Maggie Island for a couple of days with some mates, there's a fundamental mismatch there between what you're telling me is important to you and how you're actually living your life. And so you either need to change that story, and you need to either accept that I say travel is important to me, but I'm not spending money on it. That's not where I'm directing my resources. Therefore, it's actually not that important to me, which can also be a relief for people.
Yeah.
Or to go, right, that is actually what's important to me. I do want to see the world. I do want to have these experiences. I do want to do these things. What am I going to have to give up in order to make that happen? Okay, well, I have previously changed over my cars every 3 years. I can't afford to do that now. I don't want that new car as much as I want that overseas holiday, and I need to actually make a decision now so that the future years look different to how the past years looked.
Episode 3, drive a $15,000 car to draw an extra $717,000 during retirement.
You never miss a chance to plug it. It was one of the great, or the all-time hits of Money Over 50 podcast. I think the download numbers on it are through the roof. The sound quality is through the floor, and the download numbers are through the roof.
Episode number 3, we certainly didn't have the sound quality worked out as well as we do have now.
But a really good example there of that thing of, you know, because this sort of sounds a bit depressing sometimes. You go, look back at what you did spend money on, and that's who you are. But that's the beauty of being a human being, is that we have the ability to project into the future and go, well, that's what I have done in the past. That's what I have done. I have the ability to change that now. I need to be aware of what's happened. I need to really look at what did I actually do and what is the evidence-based proof of that.
Yep.
But we can make a change. We can then do that. And that's a good example of one where you can listen to that podcast and go, well, if I say that something else is more important to me, you know, what does that, how can I potentially make some of those things happen?
Thank you for listening to the Money Over 50 podcast with Money Over 50 financial advisors. For more information and resources, visit the Money Over 50 website, mo50.com.au. We look forward to catching up again soon.